camera, go ahead and you can turn off there. But this is going to be all about how to build the perfect resume to get recruiters and hiring managers reaching out to you. Obviously, a very important part of the job transition process. So a few things as we dive in here. A lot of times this is going to sound really familiar with folks, and this is what we're going to completely get rid of today. Put together a resume, make sure it's one page, apply to hundreds of jobs, tell your family and friends you're all back on the market, reach out to every hiring manager you can, let them know you saw a job posting, tell them why you think you're a good fit for that job, essentially beg them to get on a call with you. And that doesn't really work out, or it does not work out as well as it could or should, especially if you have a good resume. So if you're watching this, you are likely either out of a job or in a job that you hate, or you may actually be doing something that you love, but you know you're meant to get something more, whether it's a higher title, leadership opportunities, better pay raise, or just working in a better or right industry with a company that you actually admire. So this portion of this is all about writing the perfect resume so you can land high-paying job offers as you make this transition. But there's a secret that a lot of people don't talk about. This is only one component. Your resume is part of a component that has 5 steps to it. Good news is it works every time. Bad news is it only works if you do it in sequential order. And your resume is actually step number 2, which means today you guys are also going to get a bonus here. You're getting step 1 and step 2. So we always start, in order for you to write the perfect resume, you have to know your end goal, and you have to become very granular with that goal so that we can reverse engineer the path to get you there. So I like to use an analogy to make this make a little bit more sense. If you are in California right now and your friend says, hey, I need you to drive to New York. Okay, you can't use a map, no GPS, you just have to drive there. Should be relatively easy because if you drive east, you're probably going to get to New York, and you're right. But ask yourself, are you going to take the fastest route? Probably not. Probably going to take some inefficient route. You're probably going to hit detours along the way, probably get stuck in avoidable traffic at multiple points, may even make some stops that you shouldn't have made, but you will eventually get to New York. Where in New York? Again, who knows? Maybe Buffalo, maybe a bad part of the city, literally, who knows? Now, if that same person said to you, hey, I want you to drive from LA to the M&M store in Manhattan, and you can use your phone. Okay, well, now all you have to do is plug it into Waze, and it's going to show you the fastest route. It's going to know which turns to make, what routes to go, and then more importantly, which routes you need to avoid. Also the cops along the way. So now how that relates to your career is looking at, okay, well, how many detours have you taken, right? How many companies have you worked for, or maybe you're in one right now that didn't really serve you or your life's mission? How many times have you been stuck? You're either not getting opportunities, you're not getting pay raises, whatever the case may be. A lot of people will feel that and say, hey, I just have to get to New York. But in reality, we just need to know what your M&M store is. Once we have a very clearly defined picture of that, then we can implement this strategy. So step number 1 is getting really clear on your M&M store. Your career nirvana is what we call it. Once you know that, then we know exactly what to put on your resume. If you skip that step 1, now again, I said the strategy works every time, only if you do it in sequential order. So if you skip that step number 1, we don't know. So once you know that, once you know your next role that's going to get you to your career nirvana, your M&M store, whatever the case may be, then we know how to articulate your strengths, your value, the impact that you make. And then that's when you get it right, recruiters and hiring managers will start reaching out to you, even when you're switching careers, even when you're switching industries, even if you are entry level. It works across the board. So a couple of people that I like to highlight here, 2 in particular, these are guys that were starting from scratch. This one, it got cut off here. He used to have in his LinkedIn profile that he studied aliens or something like that. It was something dumb, unrelated. We had to get it changed. But because he knew where he was going to, he had his LinkedIn profile and resume set up so that recruiters and hiring managers were actively reaching out to him throughout his career for the next best role for him. So he very quickly went from $63,000 as a starting salary to $250,000 with his base. Total comp was seven figures, just by having people actively reaching out to him. Same thing with Zach. Well, actually, Zach was a little bit different. He got his first role, but he negotiated equity and he was able to get to 7 figures in 4 years. So when you follow this, you're no longer sitting there applying to a bunch of jobs. People are actually coming out to you. And I like to just highlight those people because a lot of people will say like, no, that just doesn't work. No, it only doesn't work if you don't follow this process. We know for sure it's going to work. So some of the advice that you're going to hear is likely going to go against what you've heard. I'm only sharing the stuff that's worked. As Jared mentioned in the beginning, over 500 professionals have used this model to increase their salary by about $37,000 in 63 days. So we try to not overcomplicate it. It should be very simple. So your perfect resume. First, you are going to reverse engineer the path to your career nirvana to identify your next position. So again, let's say you want to be a chief product officer, but right now you are an associate product manager. Cool. That map, likely your next step, your next role that's going to get you closer to being a chief product officer or a senior product manager, whatever the case may be, your next step is likely going to be a product manager. So what you would do then is research 20 job descriptions across multiple companies. It doesn't have to just be the ones you want to work with. You want to research about 20 job descriptions for that next specific role. And then from there, identify the repeated keywords that are in the experience and the responsibility sections. And those are the things that we're going to make sure show up on your resume. And then again, obviously your LinkedIn profile, which is just a mirror of your resume. So here are just the overarching ingredients of what we're going to go through today for your resume. First and foremost is making sure that you have your name, contact information, and your zip code, which we'll explain a little bit more about that in a bit. Then your summary section, which will have the skills, tools, and interests, your education section, and then your experiences and accomplishments section. Some people, especially if you're more senior, your education will actually be at the bottom, or you can do some fancy designs that will show you, and it could be kind of on the side of the page. So let's dive in here. Your summary, first and foremost. This is going to be, I'm going to go through this again, guys, fairly quickly, so we have extra time at the end for specific questions. But you guys should all have the replay for this. It's being recorded. So I'm going to put a couple screens like this on the page, but not hover on them too long, because you can just come back and watch them. Or even as you're watching right now, you can go ahead and just take a screenshot of it and we'll dissect it along the way. So this is a resume for somebody who grew from $75,000, had never even broken six figures before. This resume got her foot in the door for roles that got her to $180,000. So you're going to start by going straight into the years of experience. You're going to notice here she went straight into the years of experience that she had in the skill set and who she has helped and what she has achieved. Now, we're going to go through some nuances. If you are brand new, you may not have 6 years of experience in marketing. This may be your first job in marketing. So we'll go through that in just a bit. This is going to be how you start. Then you're going to have your skills. Now, these are going to be the skills that were mentioned across those. I have 15 here, 15 plus. 15 is like the bare minimum. I would suggest like 20. The more you do, the easier it's going to be. So you're going to research, again, multiple roles, and then we're going to transfer that information into the skills. We'll go through the details here. This is the overview, so don't get too nervous. And then your interest, this is going to be 100% optional for folks. But if you want to, you can include some interests. These are non-professional things typically that may just give you a connection with somebody. Again, optional. They usually don't hurt you. It can only help you so long as it's appropriate. And then your hiring manager, recruiter may see something that just kind of, sparks common ground. That said, that is like the only borderline place for fluff is your interest. There is no other spot for fluff in your resume. So anything that is not quantifiable is fluff. This includes, not limited to here, commonly used fluff words and phrases. You should not have any of these in your resume or on your LinkedIn profile. It makes recruiters and hiring managers cringe because they're overused and not good. So nothing fast-paced, no ninja of any sort, no dynamic, expert, self-motivated, or any type of motivation, team player, passionate, self-starter, hard worker, detail-oriented. None of these words actually mean anything. Now, are all of these things important, or can they be important? Absolutely. But you don't want to use these words to describe it. You want to articulate it in a different way. So here are some examples of, again, we're going to go through and break down the formulas for these, but I wanted to just make sure, especially for those of you who are catching it on the replay, I wanted to make sure you had multiple examples from different industries so that you can pull different levels of seniority, different industries. You can go ahead and screenshot them and pull them on the replay here. These are just going to be example summaries here. And then we'll go through and we'll break it down. All right. So notice how they're all following that same format. All of these, and again, only showing you ones that I know converted well. It's very easy to go pull a resume and say, oh, it looks really professional. That's not the test of a good resume. These are from people that I know were actively had hiring managers and recruiters reaching out to them once they built it. So the format of the summary section here, you are going to start with your years of experience using the skill set in the industry. So let's say, for example, you have 8+ years of experience developing and executing global marketing and publicity campaigns in the entertainment industry. That is going to be an example of what you do have experience in. So for those of you, I know we've got quite a few people here who that you may be transferring into tech for the first time, or you may not have the exact experience. It is very probable that you do have transferable experience. So it may not be that you are 8 years senior in your role, but it may be that you have transferable skill sets that are relevant here. So we'll go through again. If for folks who have follow-up questions on that, we can dive in at the end. And then again, still in that summary section, you want to share the information that a recruiter, that a hiring manager would want to know. So these are things that you can start with those job descriptions. You want to start there to see the keywords, the experience, the things that are important to them. That's how you know what your target audience wants. You study those job descriptions, and then you get to include them here. So in this example, this person has a successful track record creating product roadmaps and establishing cross-company buy-in for the product vision, seasoned at leading cross-functional teams, including marketing, customer support, UX, UI design, engineering, and data, experience in the full product cycle, gathering and creating requirements, capturing user stories, documentation, managing complex projects from inception to launch, tracking success metrics, and sunsetting legacy products. So in this example, this is a product manager, right? So if you are breaking into, let's say, a product management role for the first time, okay, maybe you don't have any experience, in a full product life cycle gathering, okay? You don't want to lie and include that. What you want to do is you want to look at those descriptions that you studied and include as many of the things as you can. And it will become far less noticeable if, let's say, you do have experience leading teams, right? You do have experience getting buy-in from cross-functional teams. You do have experience tracking success metrics. You do have experience that is still relevant. Great. You want to put that in your summary section. And I'll explain more about why it's so important to include all of these keywords and why it's important to start with the descriptions rather than you. Short version of it is because when they're searching, you will need to make sure that you're showing up for the keywords that these recruiters and hiring managers are actually searching for. So next is you're going to insert that skill section. Again, this does not come from the tools and the skills that you love using. It does not start with you. This starts with researching the job descriptions, and then anything that you have experience in or that you know how to do or you have used, you are going to make sure it shows up in this section for your skills and your tools. And it's a really easy way to you can essentially just list them. This is going to make your resume and your LinkedIn profile very keyword rich, which means that you are going to show up as the perfect candidate for recruiters and hiring managers. 95%, and I keep emphasizing this for a reason, 95% of the information that you are adding to your resume, to your LinkedIn profile, is going to be found on those job descriptions. A lot of people flip-flop it. A lot of people start with what they have done, and then they try to mold it to the job description. Doesn't work that way. You've got to start with the job description and then insert the things that are relevant to you and the quantifiable data you have that's connected to that experience. So the more descriptions you read, the easier it's going to be to notice those patterns of what's being repeated. if it's repeated across multiple job descriptions, it's 100% important. Is this going to make your resume a bit longer? Yes, absolutely. But it also makes the recruiter and hiring manager's jobs easier, which is your number one job when you're writing your resume. So that is a summary section. Again, this is going to be your top introduction, what your target audience would want to know, aka what recruiters and hiring managers would want to know about you, and very, very keyword heavy here. Next is going to be your responsibilities, which means your experiences and your accomplishments. Now, a lot of people confuse these two, so we're going to really dig in here. Actually, I think I got rid of this slide, so I'm going to just make sure I touch it here. Your experiences, those are going to be the projects, the initiatives, the things that you worked on. Again, starting with listing out what you found on those job descriptions and seeing, hey, they wanted experience in this, making sure that you have specific examples of your life, whether within that field or transferable to that field. And so these are the things that you've worked on that you're really proud of. Your accomplishments are the quantifiable impact that it had on your company or on your team or on the customer. So we'll dig into some examples there. People usually try to cram everything that they've done here. It should only be what's relevant to this job. That means not only the descriptions that you're using, but the actual jobs that you are listing on there. So especially if you're going for a more senior role, for anybody in that bracket, you're not going to want to talk a whole lot about your associate experience. Being a good associate does not make you a good director. You can speak about that experience if it was, within X number of years and relevant, but it likely is going to have to be written in a way that shows how you were able to lead or how you have led before, even within an associate role. So, and then again, if you're transitioning industries, you want to make sure it's written in the language of your new industry. We do a lot of work with military vets, and one of the biggest things with them is we have to do like 2 translations. We've got to go from military speak, which is not English, to a normal civilian. So we go from military to civilian speak, and then from civilian speak to industry specific speak. You may have to do 1 or 2 translations to get to paint the picture of what you do using the descriptions of your next ideal role. So there's 2 options here for how you format that. Option number 1, and I'll show you examples here, is no more than 5 to 7 bullets. This is typically better if you are younger in your career. Option number 2 is going to be writing a small paragraph with just a couple of examples of key responsibilities. This is going to be more typically better if you are a little bit more senior in your role. So here is option number 1, where you can have your employment history. If you're a little bit younger in your career, you can go ahead and just do the bullet points right like that. If you're a little bit more senior, you can go ahead and do a small paragraph, and then again, no more than 3 to 4 right below that. Both of them are fine. Now, the accomplishments format. This is going to be no more than 3 to 5 bullet points. And again, no fluff. The only borderline fluff place you can have is that interest section. Everything else should not be fluff. Your accomplishments should be quantifiable, AKA like a good metric there would it be verifiable? I'm not saying that they are going to go verify everything. I'm just saying like that's a good way to test yourself, is like, hey, is this something that could have been documented? So those are things like, hey, I saved X amount of dollars, we generated X amount of revenue, or we increased profits by, X dollars or X percent, or we saved this number of hours, we got this number of people promoted, whatever the case may be. And here's an example of that. And again, it's very important here that you show quantifiable wins for your company or for your team. So with this person, they created and they pitched a Facebook Live campaign. So it's very, very descriptive of what they did for, this specific event. Working with these people resulted in this, right? So it resulted in quantifiable things. This accomplishment, they collaborated. Again, you can guess what the job descriptions were here based on what language that they're using. It's probably very important for them to collaborate with a product team, right? And then what were the results of that? 3 times yearly revenue for the company, okay? And then again, what did they do? They doubled revenue. they inserted the actual quantifiable data there within a time frame in comparison, right? And then again, assuming these are probably keywords that they found in the job descriptions. And so this is where I mentioned it's 95% from the job descriptions. And then that 5% is like, okay, what's your data that matches those experiences, those accomplishments that they're looking for you having accomplished? You don't want to just make things up. You want to have like, yes, I have this experience and here's like the data of what my effort using these skills, tools, things that you want me to have. Here's what that resulted in. Here's why I'm capable of stepping right into this role. The other thing is you want to have two versions of your resume. A normal PDF version, this is nothing fancy. This is where you are going to upload it. This should be very easy for a computer to read. Just a PDF format that you can upload, and then something for you guys to note. And we're gonna go into this a little bit specific in just a second here, is these job boards operate like the MLS. So like you guys know, we are now in, I mean, it's slightly changing here, but we're still in a seller's market. So if you were to see a house on the market for multiple months or a year in this market, you would wonder what's wrong with that house, because every other house is going real quick here. Same thing with your resume, how it operates. So what you want to do is you can go in every Sunday and you can update it. So you come back up to the top, and there's another slide that's going to show you guys what that looks like to a recruiter on the back end here. But you want to do this especially for industry specific boards. So if you are a mom who's looking for, you know, part-time work or remote work, like there are industry specific job boards for all different types of niche, for tech jobs, for remote work, for moms, for part-time, whatever the case may be. You want to go in and update each of those. The second version that you want is a visually appealing resume. This is going to be what you attach or what you send to recruiters and hiring managers. Two of our favorite options are resume.io. It's fairly cheap, fairly inexpensive, about $1. I think it's a one-time fee, might be $2 now, or you can use something like Canva, which is completely free. And it's going to be a prettier version of your resume. I'll show you an example of those as well. Now, those tweaks that I talked about, this is what I mentioned. So if you were to go in every Sunday night and tweak your resume, what the recruiters, what the hiring managers are going to see is that it was recently updated. They don't see how long it's been listed. They're going to see that it was recently updated and bring you up to the top. So that can be anything from changing your zip code. That's why we mentioned adding that, especially if you're in a large city and there's, 50 different zip codes all within you. You can go in and just change the zip code. You can go in and change a comma. Like any little thing will show that you are recently updated and bring you back to the top there. And then here is an example, and I do have to clarify this because I did get in trouble on one of our workshops. Your pretty version of your resume is not side-by-side pictures of your resume. It should still be like a PDF. So I just took screenshots of this so you guys could see it all at once. This is for a senior product manager, where it's just, this is, page 1 here, page 2 here, page 3 here. Don't lay them out on a slide like this, have them in a normal PDF where somebody, would scroll. And you can just make it a little bit prettier. Again, there's plenty of templated designs that you can use on either Canva or resume.io and just have a nicer, more appealing version of it. And then now moving forward, your LinkedIn profile is going to be a mirror of your resume. So once you've done that hard work of building out your resume, essentially the hard work is done. You are going to just copy and paste that into your LinkedIn profile. So same example up here, it's not a perfect right or wrong. You can show a little bit of personality here. And so you can see here, she was a pianist, totally fine to do something like that. I'm a fan of, I arguably have less personality than the average person, I guess. I'm a fan of being very straightforward to the point here, making sure that you've got, something that is relevant to the job that you're looking for. And then again, just copy and paste. So she had her bullet points here of what her experiences were, and then she just copy and pasted the quantifiable accomplishments of what that did for the company. You can see here, launched quantifiable number of brands, increased revenue by quantifiable amount for quantifiable number of clients in, X time, helped orchestrate this with, this quantifiable amount of profit increase. Most of what she had here, most of what she wrote here did not come from her thinking about, hey, what am I most proud of? This came from researching those job descriptions. And yes, I know I'm beating a dead horse right now. It's so important though, and we can tell if you haven't done it properly. You want to know what they're looking for, and then you just put in your data for whatever those job descriptions were looking for. Now, again, I know how much contradiction is out there. So we are only sharing the proven processes that have helped. And I'm also going to share some of the resume myths that are out there, so you hopefully don't have to worry about them. Again, is this going to go against what resume professionals say? Yes, absolutely. I promise you it will, but I also promise that it has worked for every single person that has used it. So myth number one, your resume has to be 1 page long. That's a complete myth. If you have less than 5 years of experience, yes, typically you should be able to get your whole resume on 1 page. Otherwise, 2 to 3 pages max, completely fine. Another myth, resumes should have your entire work history. Absolutely not. They should only have relevant experience. And especially if you are more senior, typically you don't need more than like 10, 15 years back. Another one is that it's okay to have grammatical errors, even if it's 1 or 2 small ones. Unfortunately, no. There's a lot of recruiters and hiring managers that will just throw it out immediately. Kind of unfortunate, but is what it is. Have somebody proofread it, especially if English is not your first language in particular. You want to have somebody, I wouldn't even trust, like Grammarly, things like that are great, but I would have somebody who not only is English their first language, but they are like a grammar nut. They are the friend you have that will correct you if you use the wrong there, or you do, Y-O-U-R instead of apostrophe R-E. Those nuts that love grammar, those are the people you want checking your resume for you. And then another myth, you need a new resume for every job you apply to. If you did step 1 and you defined your career nirvana, you did that map, and you know your next role that's going to get you closer to that, you do not. Of course, you always want to study the job description so that if they're asking for something specific, you don't want to leave it out if you're applying for it, because ideally you're only applying to companies that you actually admire. But again, that career map should avoid the need for you to have more than 1 resume. You have 1 resume in terms of what's on it, 2 versions of it, a pretty version and just like a normal PDF version. And then one of the worst myths out there spread by, I think, professional resume writers, quite frankly, your resume is not going to get you your job. Your resume, all your resume is going to do is put your foot in the door. Whether or not you get the job is going to be dependent completely on your ability to master your interview and the negotiation process. So the way I like to think about it is like your career map, that step 1 career nirvana, that's to make sure that you are knocking on the right door. Then your resume will get your foot in that door, and then your interview will actually get you through that door. It is not about your resume. It is not, we've got plenty of people where they didn't even actually need a resume. They were able to skip that piece altogether. And again, it's a very important step, but it is going to fall apart if it is not supported by those other 4 steps of this process. So we already went through step 1, that is getting clear on where it is you're actually going. If you don't have that, everything else falls apart. If not, just this transition falls apart, like your life, your happiness, your fulfillment, actually building a meaningful career doesn't happen without step 1. Step 2, that's everything that we just covered here. How are we doing on time? We're good on time for questions here. That is going to be making sure that you're building a keyword optimized. It's like, I want to drill that into your head, a keyword optimized resume, so that recruiters and hiring managers are reaching out to you. I always like to say, like, if you were to give your resume to like 100 different professional resume writers, you would get 100 different versions back. And the only way to know, I mean, they're going to give you arguments as to why theirs is the best and why theirs is good. Our litmus test for whether or not you have a good resume is how many people are actively reaching out to you with the roles that you want. And then step 3 is going to be you will have people reaching out to you. You also need to be proactively reaching out and getting in front of the right people. Very important that you have a good resume so that you can easily pass it along to them. They can easily pass it along to the people who will impact your career. And then, of course, mastering the interview. Again, that door analogy, your resume will kind of keep your foot in the door. Your interview is going to get you through that door. And then you have to be able to negotiate a competitive offer. We like to say intelligently negotiate. Typically, all you have to do is send one email. So if you do it properly, you're setting proper expectations along these steps, and then it's just one counter offer email, and people will typically get some pretty decent results. I like to highlight here Gaurav. He was actually our founder. He started as a job bouncer. He was the one that built this whole framework out. And he started with 10 back-to-back dead-end jobs right after college. Started selling Yellow Page ads. He moved into software. He got laid off from recruiting. Like, he bounced around for 6 full years. And then once he figured this out, once he went through those 5 steps and he knew about the resume and making sure that, you know, he was doing each of these things, that is what changed everything for him. And I really like, it's not like small jumps that happen when you change these things. It's massive growth that happens. He went from 6 years of dead end jobs to then $300,000 base salary. And he was one of the youngest executives of a publicly traded company. Total comp packages were 7 figures when you like evaluate stocks and all that stuff. For myself personally, similar path where I thought I was doing like the greatest possible thing at 48,000 as a contractor, and then implemented this and was, you know, a director by the time I was 24, doing over 300,000. Now, obviously not that old and doing what I thought I would do during retirement. And I still can't believe it, quite frankly. It does not have to take you 50 years. When you map out your career path, when you follow each of these steps, it will happen far quicker. Again, you have to implement each of the steps and you have to do it in the right order. Again, I want to leave plenty of time for questions, but this is more just for you guys to see, like, it does actually work. And it can get you exactly where you want to go. You don't have to settle. You don't have to get paid less than what you're worth. But I'll make sure, I think we're close to time here. I want to give you guys a free tool here as well. And remind you, you are literally one job offer away. We always say this, you are one job offer away from drastically changing the trajectory of your career in your life. One of the things that will get in the way is being organized. And so when you do this and you do it properly, at first it's overwhelming to have like go through and do all of this stuff. And then it very quickly becomes overwhelming dealing with all of the messages that you are getting from recruiters, from hiring managers. So if you guys want, we can even put it in the chat so that it's clickable here. If you just go to this website, we have a free job tracker for you guys. You can use this. It's exactly what our students use. There's a video on the landing page there so that you can, it walks you through how to use it and use that to keep track of all of the job, the aspects that go into your job search. So reaching out to people, following up with recruiters, all that good stuff, any action items that come up. And with that, I will open the door up. I will open the floor up for any questions. I'm not sure if there's any that are in there already, so we can go ahead and open it up for questions, especially if there's anybody who has a specific situation where it's like, okay, yes, that makes sense, but like I have this unique situation that may or may not make a difference here. All right, let's see. Will the recording, yes, you guys should definitely have the recording of this. So for the PDF or the Microsoft Word, yes, I would recommend, I would never actually recommend having a Microsoft Word unless they only accept Microsoft Word. But I would upload the quote unquote ugly version because it likely isn't going to have any graphics on it. It's just going to be a PDF, like download it. Even if you wrote it in Microsoft Word, download it as a PDF because then you'll also make sure that there's no like orphaned headers or anything like that at the bottom of the page, and then upload that like ugly PDF version to ZipRecruiter.
Priscilla has her hand raised, so.
Oh, awesome.
I will unmute because I have a question.
Perfect.
First of all, thank you for that. That was super helpful. So I am transitioning from education, teaching to
Okay.
tech.
Mhm.
And one thing I've had trouble with when I'm making my resume is the quantifying bit.
Mhm.
Because I don't have profits, I don't have that sort of thing. How do I go about doing that?
Great question. What roles specifically within tech?
Software engineer.
Okay, so do you have, I'm assuming you went to like a boot camp or anything like that, or
I
something?
am
like that?
currently in one and also doing some like side free things as well.
Perfect. So that's where you can add in some quantifiable things there. So with those job descriptions, what you're going to see is there's going to be like a lot of technical skills that they're looking for, like, you know, languages, things like that. So those are all going to come from your boot camp experience, and translating that and like the portfolio stuff that the side projects that you're working on, you can use that for that section. In terms of it being quantifiable, ideally you can work on something, and a really good hack actually for coders is going to a nonprofit, because you can typically get, they will have the same jobs there, but they will be far more open to having you work, and especially if you're willing to like volunteer to get that experience. And if you can work on a project that's going to have an impact, that's a really good hack for coders in particular to do. I mean, a lot of that's true for like a lot of different job descriptions, because they are a business, they are an entity. And you can typically find a role there to just bolster up that experience very quickly. And it's typically less well run. So you'll typically have more responsibilities than you actually would in, you know, the private sector or, you know, corporate for-profit stuff. So that's a really good hack there for some of those side projects to be nonprofits, because you'll get some really great quantifiable data there. The other side of that as a teacher is you are going to have some of those non-technical skills that they're looking for as well. And being able to just, again, translate those. Sometimes you have to get creative, which I'm going to put an asterisk there. That does not mean untruthful. You just have to like do some creative thinking of like, okay, they're asking about how you were able to work with like cross-functional teams or whatever the case may be. Well, you probably do that, but you don't call it a cross-functional team as a teacher. You call it, you know, different department, whatever the case may be. So there's likely going to be a lot that you can overlap from those side projects. A lot of it will come from there, especially if you can do some nonprofit things, make an impact, and then getting creative or spending time translating what you did as a teacher for those non-technical things and getting that translated over.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. Actually, one other thing to tack onto there, and this is a little bit less of the resume, but if you are somebody that is coming over with not a lot of tech experience, this is helpful for everybody. It's really good if you can negotiate equity in, especially if you're going to a startup, because that will dramatically grow your salary over the course of years, as your experience will also dramatically grow from like 0 to 5 as an engineer or whatever the case may be. You will typically grow a ton of experience, and salary doesn't always match that for people unless you're, you know, really good at that and navigating that. One of the best like hacks for that is just negotiating equity in your salary, but that's more for like another workshop. So for resumes, that's the advice, and then that's a hack for later on for folks. And then other questions. Do you have any advice on cover letters? Do we need to do them? Good question. It's one of those annoying answers. It depends. Oftentimes, no, you don't. If a company is specifically asking for one, then yes, you do. But they're becoming less frequent. What do you recommend for the summary when doing a career transition in terms of experience? Good question. So very similar there, where you're likely, if you're transitioning into a new industry in tech, if you're coding, you're likely going to have to come into an entry role. So they're not expecting you to have 6 years of experience, but that's where it's really helpful for you to have boot camp, or again, that nonprofit stuff where you can share if X number of years of experience with a skill set. And so if you have a transferable skill set, then you may have more than just, 1 year of it. If you don't, and it's only 1 year, it's totally fine for you to have, 1 year of this skill set that you got from either with a nonprofit, side projects, boot camps, things of that nature. Does this method work for middle-aged person trying to change careers? Absolutely. So even more so, because you have even more data to pull from, you have more experience to pull from, it actually gets more beneficial the more senior you get. I see you, Priscilla. If you're newer in your career, how do you figure out the next role that you should pursue? Any advice on figuring out step 1 of your career nirvana? Great question. You want to, it takes a little bit of self-reflection, quite frankly. You want to look at yourself and where do you want to be at the end of your career? Like, where are you hoping that you are going to end up? Not just your title, but what kind of life do you want? Your lifestyle. Do you want to have work-life balance? Do you want to be a parent? Do you want to be married? Do you want to be able to travel? Do you want to make $20,000 a month? Are you happy at $5,000 a month? Looking at all of those things and where you want to be by the end of your career, you always start there. That becomes your North Star, your career and your personal life, and then you get to reverse engineer back from there. So the best method, or the best thing that you can do, is go get really curious, have a couple of ideas of where you want to end up, and then go research those people with those roles who have that title that you think you want, and look at the path that they took. That's how you can build out that's how you reverse engineer that path that I showed in the beginning. And you can go have conversations with them. I think you guys even have access to the replay, or you should have access to the replay on how to reach out to those people. And it can be a very simple message. I mentioned this in the networking workshop, where I got this advice and I reached out to Fortune 500 C-level executives, and about 8 of them I reached out to. I heard from all of them except for 1. And essentially the message that I sent to them was, hey, I would love to be you in 20 years. Do you have any advice that you'd give your younger self? And they all almost all of them responded to me with some of the greatest advice that I've ever gotten. I keep it all in a Google Doc. I say this all the time. I would trade my entire college education if I just had that Google Doc. And people are very willing to share advice. And so you can go and let people know. There's templates that you can use from that workshop, and just ask people, have conversations with them, get very curious, see what paths they took, see what made them choose that. And as they're talking about their stories and where they're at now, you'll hear things and you'll be like, that's exactly what I want. Or you'll hear things and you'll be like, I don't want that at all. And then you can shift and pivot, but it's so important to just be so curious at that stage. How can you apply these tips as a student? Same thing, get experience doing side projects. You can get, do that outreach, or do that process of looking and figuring out what you want to do, and then go find opportunities to start getting that experience. And there are a ton of entry-level jobs out there, guys, that it's okay for you to not have this perfect resume with all of this relevant experience. Those are a little bit easier, obviously, to navigate, because the expectations there are not, hey, I need all of this stuff. And so same thing, when you review those entry-level job descriptions, look for what they're asking for, and then make sure those keywords are in your resume and you have some experience with them. I'll give you a perfect example. I was coming out straight out of school as a student. I had absolutely no experience, and I wanted to get into marketing. So one of the job descriptions that I read, and at the time I was so dumb, I didn't even know like a director role they didn't have any years of experience on it. So I applied for a director role straight out of as a student, and they asked for all of this different experience and stuff. So I went and I just got free like trials of the softwares that they were asking for, and I played around with it. And I included that in my application saying like, hey, I'm familiar with this, this, and this. I don't actually have experience with this. So I went and I got a free trial of it and I've been playing around in it and I'm familiar. I'm very confident I can learn it because it's very similar to this other thing that I learned. And they were so blown away. Nobody does that. I didn't know it was weird at the time, but nobody does that. And so they hired me. They didn't hire me as the director, obviously, but they made a position for me when they saw that in my resume or in my application there. Let's see. I'm an educator with 12 years of experience attempting to break into the field of software engineering self-taught. Do you have any specific recommendations on transferable skills from education to software engineering that I should focus on adding to my resume? Yes, I think we probably covered that quite a bit with Priscilla there. Similar situation. Specific recommendations on transferable skills? Same thing there, where it's going to come from the job descriptions first. A lot of those intangible things that they're asking for, that's going to be a little bit more dependent on culture as well. So you can find things within the job descriptions that it's like, hey, they're looking for, again, your ability to communicate or organization or your ability to, communicate or like problem solve. Each of those things, you likely are going to have transferable skills from when you are a teacher. And if you don't, those self-taught things that you are doing, projects that you are working on, make sure you have them there. How to write experiences when for a freelance or a contractor that works with different agencies within a year. I'm not sure what you're asking for there. But if you just, if you can just rephrase that, we can definitely get to that.
Oh yeah, okay, I can explain that.
Oh, perfect.
That's my question. Yeah. So let's say because I work with many agencies within 1 year, maybe like a few agencies in 1 year, but then in the resume, sometimes you say like from this year, like 2019, 2022, is it odd that you have many agencies that you work with within that frame?
I got what you mean. So in that case, what I would do, I wouldn't even list the different agencies. I would just list that you were a contractor. And then you can write about your experiences that you did. You don't necessarily have to write all of the different agencies that you did contract work for. If somebody asks for that in referrals or references, things like that, then you can, bring it up.
Perfect. Thank you.
You got it. And thank you for unmuting. How can we word a resume for a career switcher? I'm coming from being a public relations content creator to being a front-end developer. So yes, very similar thing. Looks like they're not here anymore. So I feel like we covered that quite a bit, but if you're watching the replay of this to get your answer and you don't feel like I did, you can just send me an email, or send the team an email, info@careersprout.com. What if your career nirvana could potentially end in two paths where the two roles that we're interested in? What's the best way to merge those resumes into a singular LinkedIn profile? So you may have like two different paths that you could go to. They should lead to one next role. If they don't, I would get really curious and I would spend time talking to both of those paths and see which one is best for you and choose that. Unless they're very similar, like you aren't sure if you want to be you could be a front end or a back end developer. Like that's something that you could very easily merge because it's, very comparable things. And there's a lot of job descriptions that are looking for, those skills. I'm senior enough to start thinking about age description, about 20 plus years. How would you suggest modifying the X years of experience and fuzz it a bit? I could say 15 plus years, which is true, but misleading. Personally, I would look for jobs that value that experience versus ones that would discriminate against it, would be my advice there. There are a ton of people and a ton of companies. And again, this is probably going to be a little controversial because a lot of people do experience age discrimination. But there are a lot of companies that would really value that for a more senior role. So just making sure that your years of experience match what you're going to be able to provide for those roles. There are a lot that would really value it. That would be my advice there. Like technically, could you say 15 plus years? Yes, it's technically true as well. You could also just say, you know, assuming you're looking, since you're more senior, you're probably looking for a more director, like a more senior role, you're looking to be a director, you could just say, you know, maybe you have 5 years as a director, 5+ years experience as a director, would be something that you could do there that's completely honest. Interdepartmental or multidisciplinary. I'm not sure if that, I think you're probably responding to somebody else. Do you help to place people who did grammar school, brand ambassador, and odd jobs? So we don't actually technically place people. We're a coaching company that gives you, you know, the step-by-step process so that you can apply and transition, accept secure high-paying job offers for brand ambassador, odd jobs. It would kind of depend whether, so short answer is yes, we can like technically help anybody if they're making a transition. The longer answer is it's going to depend, what role you get is going to be dependent on, you know, what you're qualified for doing. Any advice for moms returning to work? How can I show I'm still employed? Great question. I know we're coming up on time here. Technically, I'm okay to stay if for a few minutes after, if that's okay with you guys. If not, you guys can cut me off. I don't know if the moderators have to go here. So for moms that are returning to work, career gaps are far more acceptable now. It is not as big of a deal. We work with a ton of people that have substantial career gaps, and all that matters is that you know how to create a narrative around that so that it is a strength, not a downside. So being, again, it's the same, starting with those job descriptions, you likely have all of the experience from pre. If you don't, what are the things that you did during your gap? Is it possible that you did any contract work or consulting work or things like that that aren't necessarily like full-time, long-term jobs, but you have kept your skills fresh, all that good stuff. Those gaps, it's more of a mental barrier for you than a hiring manager, quite frankly, especially if you were a mom raising kids and now coming back. I mean, it's for just about anything now, but moms in particular, that's the most common one.
So just want to be mindful of time, but we do have 2 more questions left. So if you don't, you know, if you're okay going
Yeah.
over, we can answer those questions, and then I think we're done taking questions after that. Thank you.
Awesome. So I was taken on as an apprentice by my mentor, who is a lead dev. Over the past 6 months, I've been learning development via online courses and his guidance and assistance, trying to find my first job in the industry, but want to relocate to New York, New Jersey area. Is it too much to want a relocation assistance with no experience? Also, any tips on listing my apprenticeship on my resume, since it isn't easy to verify as a boot camp? So let me start at the bottom here. Doesn't matter that it's not like quote unquote verifiable as a boot camp. Same thing as if you were like self-taught doing it on your own. All of that experience is still just as relevant. So you don't have to worry about that. And then, so I would just list it as, you know, whatever the job was that you were doing. And then, is it a bit too much to want a relocation assistance? Not necessarily. So if you include that in, so if you make a really compelling, you have a really compelling narrative, and then you go in and you crush your interviews, that's typically not a problem, especially if you like set those expectations up front. I just had somebody, we've got recruiters who reach out to us all the time for like specifically for our students. And there's a Google company, I'm blanking on the name right now, that they were willing to offer, you know, 120 to 140 plus up to like $50,000 in added comp, whether that was through sign-on bonuses or relocation assistance and equity. So it's typically within budgets for folks. Again, if you make if you present yourself very well in those interviews and you have a compelling narrative around why you would be worth that and why you want to grow with the company. Do you have any advice on creating a good email signature to use while communicating with recruiters and hiring managers? It's not going to necessarily make or break you. I would just basic things. You don't have to be overly fancy unless you're going into like if you're in a creative role and marketing, then yeah, it's probably more helpful to have like a nice design in your signature. It's not going to hurt you to not, but then just having very clear contact information, ways to get a hold of you, or if you have a portfolio, like linking to those things would be helpful. So it could be like a portfolio if you have it, or your LinkedIn profile may even be helpful, things like that. All right, I think that was it. Yeah, if you guys have, sorry about that. If you guys have any further questions, I think the coach's email address, the team email address is in there. Feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, hopefully that was helpful for you guys.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Katie, for such a great presentation. And I hope to see you all at our next virtual events. We will be doing one more webinar with Katie and Career Sprout as part of our 3 class series. So please keep up to date with, on Meetup, or join our Twitter at Women Who Code NYC, and also join our Slack channel to be up to date. Thank you again, Katie, for your time. Have a great night.
Absolutely. Awesome. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.